Masechet Gittin Daf Samech Gimel, a long sugya about the different formulations that the husband and the wife and the messenger say. We have to figure out that, remember, there's two types of messengers, either a messenger leholacha that will deliver the get, so that would be appointed by the husband, or one appointed by the wife, which would be a shaliach le-kabbalah. A messenger can be only one or the other. And so now we're going to have a mix and match game to figure out if different people said different things. Is there some way of getting the get to her in a valid method? So here we go. Itmar, haveli giti. The wife says, bring me the get as a shaliach le-holacha. Now, the wife cannot actually appoint a shaliach holacha, but she's saying, I don't want you to receive it to me. I want you to go get it and bring it to me, and he will appoint you. Now, the messenger, he is not a good messenger, and he gets to the husband and says, Ve'ishtecha amra hitkabeli giti. He reports to the husband that your wife told me to receive the get on her behalf. Maybe this is a lazy messenger and he doesn't want to go all the way back to her, so he would rather that he just receive the get and that's it. He can be done. The problem is she never appointed him as such. Now he says, the husband, V'hu amar helach kema she'amra. Here is the get according to her instructions. So a lot of confusion, because is it what he thinks that she said, or what she actually said? So what is going to be the rule? If he in the end gives it to her according to all these formulations, will it be a good get or not? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba, Bar Avu, Amar Rav, Afilu higia get liyada ena migureshet. So Rav Nachman says, even if he receives it and gives it to her, it's not good. There is no get, because he is not validly appointed. He was never appointed by her to be a shaliach le-kabbalah. And he thought that it's going to be a shaliach kabbalah, so he never appointed the messenger to be a shaliach le-holacha. So he is not a messenger either way. Okay, Shema mina adibura dideh kasamich. So we can infer from here that the husband is relying on the messenger's words, right? In other words, the husband thinks that the messenger is meant to be a shaliach le-kabbalah. And so he gives it to him as such, and he never appoints him to be a shaliach leholacha. Di adibura dida kasamich mekimate gita liyada mi hatigaresh. Because if he was relying on his wife's statement, in other words, he said whatever she said, and that's what he said. Whatever she said, I don't know what she said. I don't know if you're saying the truth or not. Whatever she said, that's what I want you to be. Well, she said that the shaliach should be a shaliach leholacha, and if he authorizes that, then he can be a shaliach leholacha. And then once the shaliach came back to her, she would be divorced. So we see from here that we follow what he thinks, that we follow his words, his report, that to be a shaliach le-kabbalah, not what she actually said. All right, so this is a conclusion that we're trying to derive from Rav Nachman. Here's the structure that we're going to see. First, we're going to reject this conclusion, but this question is going to come back. And then we're going to have 3 attempts to reject Rav Nachman. 3 challenges on Rav Nachman, but we will answer all of them. Okay, so first, regarding this assumption that the husband is following his words, his interpretation, whatever, his report. Amar Rav Ashi hachi hashta says, really, can you compare these cases? Bishlama itmar ipecha. In other words, can you actually get this conclusion from this case? If the case was flipped around, that hitkabel ligiti v'ishtecha amra haveh ligiti v'hu amar helach kema she'amra, change the case altogether, and it's a case where she said be a shaliach le-kabbalah, and then when the messenger goes, he reports and says wrongly, your wife told me to be a shaliach le-holacha. And he says, here, take it according to what she said. Now, ve'amar Rav Nachman, amar Rabba, bar Avu, amar Rav. And if it was about that case, Rav Nachman reported, kevan shegia get liyado megoreshet, and if he would have said, he didn't say any of this, Rav Nachman did not address this case, and he said, ana megoreshet. But if it was this case, and Rav Nachman would have said, that once it gets to her hands, the divorce is good. Alma dibura dida hu de kasamich. Then I could have concluded in a valid way that we're following dibura dida upon her statement, because she said, I want to be a shaliach le Kabbalah, and so in that case, once it gets to his hand, the messenger's hand, and so she said, I want to be a shaliach Kabbalah. The messenger reported the wrong thing, but the husband said, whatever she said, that's what I want. So, and in that case, if the halacha was that it would be a valid get as soon as the messenger receives it, then we could conclude that we're following what she actually said. Iname liyada adibura dide hu kasamich. Or if Rav Nachman, if that was the case, and Rav Nachman would have ruled that the get takes effect when it gets back to her hands, then I could have concluded that the husband is following the messenger's words, because the messenger said, I'm supposed to be a shaliach leholacha, and then the husband has the authority to say, yes, you are shaliach leholacha, and then once he gets to her, then I would know for sure that it's following his words. So yes, if it was that was the case, then I could conclude one way or the other. But in our case, which is not flipped around, in our case, the reason why it doesn't work at all, this get, according to Rav Nachman, is for a different reason. It's because the shaliach is uprooting his own agency. She said to be a shaliach leholacha. The messenger says, I'm going to be a shaliach lekabbalah, meaning the messenger is rejecting his job as a shaliach leholacha, and he's telling himself, I refuse. Now, messenger can always refuse, and he refuses to be a shaliach leholacha. He only will accept being a shaliach lekabbalah. The problem is, she did not authorize him to be a shaliach kabbalah, and the husband doesn't have the possibility of authorizing a shaliach kabbalah, and that's why he is not a shaliach either way. But you can't prove from here, not one way or the other, whether in a general case like this, the husband is assuming what the messenger said or what she originally said. Okay, so that conclusion from the Rav Nachman is inconclusive, but now we're going to challenge Rav Nachman's law himself. Amar Rav Huna bar Chiyat Hashema, ha'omer hitkabel get ze lishti, o holech get ze lishti, rasa lachzor yachazor. We're quoting our Mishnah, that a husband that says hitkabel, he tells a messenger, receive it for my wife, or take this to my wife. He is authorizing the messenger either way. So even though he says the word hitkabel, we assume he means that this should be a shaliach laholacha, and that's why he can change his mind. Now we infer, Tamad rasa halor rasa have a get. The reason why it would not be a get is because he wants to change his mind. But if he doesn't want to change his mind, then it would be a valid get. Why would it be a valid get? But the husband cannot make a shaliach kabbalah. So how come when he says hitkabel get zeh and he does not retract it, why is it good? Rather, we say, since he decided he's going to divorce her, so we assume he is saying, in effect, thinking, she should be divorced in any way that she can be divorced. He didn't learn Daf Yomi. He hasn't gone through Masechet Gittin. People are not an expert in this type of shaliach and that type of shaliach. He's just saying language, whatever language. But his intention is what counts. His intention is, I want to divorce my wife. So here, take this get, give this get, bring this get, accept this get, whatever he's saying. His point is, get this get to her in some way that it will be effective. And therefore, we don't really care about his language. We care about his intention. And it will therefore take effect as a shaliach leholacha, because that's the only way it can take effect. In other words, he's leaving it open-ended, right? Here, make sure somehow she gets divorced. I don't really care what the mechanism is. Therefore, since we see that in our Mishnah, in the case that we started today with, it should be the same thing. She said, Shelech laholacha. The messenger misrepresented himself and saying, I'm going to share Kabbalah. The husband, even though it doesn't matter what he said, his intention is, here, take this get and somehow get me divorced. I don't really care how you get divorced, and therefore we should apply the interpretation that he is making the messenger a shaliach leholacha, and they should be divorced. So this is a challenge, first challenge to Rav Nachman. We answer, Hachi hashta, hatam adam yodea she'en shelichut lekabbalah, ve'gamad ve'natan l'shem holacha, hacha ta'eh. Says, no, it's not the same. People do know something about different types of messengers, and in this case, the case of our Mishnah, a person knows that a husband knows that he cannot make a shaliach lekabbalah, and therefore, even though he's saying a language of hitkabel get, he means that he wants it to be a shaliach lolacha. Like we said yesterday, what he means is hitkabel, you take this and bring it to my wife. So he knows what the words mean, and he knows that he really means to make it a shaliach leholacha, even though that's not the straightforward interpretation of the words. That's okay, as long as he knows what he's doing. But in the case of Rav Nachman, he is mistaken. He thinks that this is a shaliach lekabbalah because the messenger represented himself as a shaliach lekabbalah. So he thinks that is a way, he thinks it can work as a shaliach kabbalah, but he's mistaken because she never made him a shaliach lekabbalah, and therefore he is giving it to her based on false premises, and he's not thinking to himself, oh well, it'll be a shaliach leholacha. And so we defend Rav Nachman. All right, second challenge to Rav Nachman. Amar Rava Tashema. This is from a Mishnah coming up soon. Ketana shamra hitkabeli giti, eno get ad she'agia get liyada. A minor married girl who says to a messenger, go receive my get, a minor cannot appoint a messenger, and therefore it's not a get until it gets to her hand. A minor can receive a get, but not appoint a messenger. Now, kimateli geta liyada miha megarsha. When it gets to her, then she is divorced. We ask, ve'amai v'halav shalech leholacha shavye. The husband did not appoint the messenger to be a messenger laholacha, because the messenger, this is a truthful messenger, she said, be a shaliach lekabbalah. The messenger went to the husband and said, oh, your wife said I should be a shaliach lekabbalah. The husband gives it to her as a shaliach lekabbalah. The problem is, he can't be a shaliach lekabbalah because a minor can't appoint one, and he did not appoint him to be a shaliach laholacha. So there shouldn't be a get here. So why does it work? Rather, we apply here, we're trying again, the same principle, that since the husband decided, yes, I want to divorce my wife, so his thought is ambiguous, and his thought is, let it get there in any way that will be valid. And so since he is kind of leaving it open-ended, so then we will say, well, which way could it work? It could work as a shalech laholacha. So then you'll ask him after, oh, did you mean to be a shalech laholacha? He would say, yeah, I meant it however it would work. I don't know the details. I don't know the details of the law. Let it, yeah, sure, halacha, whatever you want. And so we apply we apply a valid method, even if he does not have one in mind. Therefore, back to Rav Nachman's case, we should apply the same principle, even though she made the messenger halacha. He represented himself as Kabbalah, and the husband said, yeah, whatever she said, what he means is, however it can work, and we should assume that it will work as a shaliach leholacha, and that's against Rav Nachman, who said it doesn't work. And we reject this challenge. No, people do know the difference, and the husband in this case, when an agent comes from his minor wife, he knows this law. Everybody knows the Mishnah, come on. And he knows that a minor cannot appoint an agent, and therefore the husband, when he gives it to the messenger, is giving it to the messenger as a shaliach leholacha. He's going to correct her. He's going to correct the messenger. Listen, messenger, you can't be a shaliach lekabbalah. I'm giving you to as a messenger leholacha, and that's why it works. Whereas in Rav Nachman's case, the husband, he can be as learned as the greatest sage. but he's under a false premise because the messenger misrepresented himself as a Kabbalah, and therefore the husband did not correct the messenger, gave it to the messenger as a Kabbalah, but he was not a Shalech Kabbalah because the wife never made him so, and that's why it's no good. Rav Nachman is defended. Third challenge, Tashema, Haveli Giti Vishtecha Amra Hitkabeli Giti. Hitkabeli Giti Vishtecha Amra Haveli Giti. So we have both possibilities, either that she said, Be a shaliach leholacha, and the messenger misrepresented himself as Kabbalah, or she said, Be messenger to Kabbalah, and he misrepresented himself as a shaliach leholacha. And now the husband said, Vu amad holech v'tenla, or zechela, or hitkabela, or hitkabela. He said any of these formulas. Now, what we're going to discuss is which of the three formulas that the husband said goes with which one of these two cases. All right, that's the structure of this baraita is open to a lot of interpretation, right? Is it that, we have case one this way, case two the other way around? If he said any of these, because these are different. Holech is bia shalech leholacha. Zecheh is lekabbalah. Hitkabel is also lekabbalah. Yet there's one outcome for all of them. So in all these cases, he will be a shaliach leholacha, and so therefore he can change his mind, and once it gets to her hand, it is migureshet. Okay, so now we're going to try to figure out, to try to line up which of the husband's responses line up with the first case or the second case. My love, Kabbalah, Kabbalah, v'holacha, holacha. In this version, we're going to match it up like a chiastic structure. And so that when he says Kabbalah, that's the last thing over here, that would match up with the first case when she says be a holacha and the wife says be Kabbalah, and he is agreeing with what he hears from the messenger. And holacha, this case where he says be holech, that would match up with the second case when she says be a messenger to receive, and he misrepresents himself as a shaliach laholacha. So are we not matching up his words with the messenger's words? And if so, then the case of Kabbalah would be the same as Rav Nachman's case, because that's where she says be shaliach laholacha. The messenger says I'm a shaliach Kabbalah, and he says okay, fine, he's believing him, then be a shaliach Kabbalah, and yet this my baraita says it is a good get, whereas Rav Nachman says it's not a good get. So we have a question. And we answer, no, that's not a good way to match it up. You should match it, instead of A-B-B-A, match it up A-B-A-B, such that, look, Kabbalah aholacha, v'holacha ah-Kabbalah. When the husband says, be a shaliach le-Kabbalah, that matches up with the messenger saying holacha. When the husband says be a shaliach le-holacha, that's when the messenger misrepresents himself as a shaliach le-Kabbalah. So that the case that would be equivalent where to Rav Nachman is when it does not appear in this baraita, right? When the case when she says bi holacha, and then he says the messenger says Kabbalah, and then the husband says Kabbalah does not appear here, because here we have a case where she says holacha, he says Kabbalah, and then he says holacha, and he's actually saying it, right? This guy actually baraita is entirely different, because he doesn't say, well, do whatever she said, right? So it's not clear, is he going on his words or her words? He's just saying, right, be one or the other. So therefore, this baraita is not addressing the case of Rav Nachman. But now we challenge that interpretation. I Kabbalah aholacha, if when he says be a messenger le Kabbalah, that's if the husband says be a shaliach Kabbalah, that's a case where the messenger said I am a shaliach laholacha, and that means that's a case where the wife said Kabbalah. So we're going with the wife saying Kabbalah. The messenger misrepresents as holacha, but then the husband says Kabbalah. So now on both ends, the wife and the husband both say Kabbalah. In that case, mechimati mate gita liyadeh lealtar have gita. Then as soon as the messenger receives a get, there should be a get right away. And that's not what the Braita says. So the Braita says only when it gets back to her. Therefore, Shmat Minat Dibura Dide Kasamich. So maybe we can resolve the opening question we had based on this, that we follow his interpretation. In other words, when the husband says Bia Shaliach LeKabbalah, he's assuming not what she said, but rather what the messenger said. In this case, the messenger says Holacha, and that's why it's not a good get immediately, only when it gets to her hands. And we reject that also. Hachi hashta hatam kamar le helach kema she'amra. Hachami kamar le helach kema she'amra. No, the case is different. When we ask that question back in Rav Nachman's case, that's where the husband says, take it according to what she said. There we have a question. Does he mean what she actually said or what he thinks she said? So there we had a question. But in this case, he didn't say that. He said, Bia Shaliach LeKabbalah. And so it's this case is not equivalent, and you cannot derive any conclusion from this case. So this is the three challenges against Rav Nachman, and we saved Rav Nachman from all of them. So we also have no conclusion in the case of Rav Nachman whether we follow his interpretation or what she actually said. The Gemara continues with a Tosefta that has a two-way machloket about what these formulas mean. Tenor Banan, hitkabel li giti, v'ishtecha amra hitkabel li giti. So now this is a very plain case, nothing so complicated. She appoints a messenger to receive the get, and the messenger tells the truth and says to the husband, your wife told me to receive the get. Now, vehu omer holech v'ten la, zechela v'hitkabela, if the husband said any of the following phrases, holech, zeche, right, take this, acquire it, receive it, then if he wants to change his mind, he cannot, lo yachzor. In other words, according to Tanakama, we're about to see in a second that Tanakama is the same as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He thinks that the word holech is the same as receive. And therefore, even though he says holech, it's the same as saying hitkabel, and the get is effective immediately when the messenger gets it. Rabbi Natan omer holech v'ten la ratza lachzor yachzor zechela v'hitkabel la ratza lachzor lo yachzor. Rabbi Natan thinks that the phrase holech v'ten means you be a shalech leholacha, and it cannot mean receive. And therefore, if he says holech and he wants to change his mind, he can change his mind. Even though she said you're going to be a shalech lekabbalah, that holech changes him to a shalech leholacha. However, he agrees on zechela hitkabela, lasalachzor lo yachzor, acquire it, receive it, then the messenger is a messenger lekabbalah. Now we have a continuation of the Tosefta. Rabbi Omer bechulan im rasa lachzor lo yachzor, aval im amar lo efshi shetekabel la ela holech v'ten la rasa lachzor yachzor. Rabbi says on all the phrases, if he wants to change his mind, he cannot change his mind. So you see that is the same as the Tanakama. Except that Rabbi adds that if the husband says, I do not want you to receive it on her behalf, rather holech v'ten, then he can change his mind. In other words, Rabbi is explaining that holech is ambiguous. It can mean receive, but if he says, I don't want you to receive, rather holech, then it's clear that holech means shaliach leholacha. Now the Gemara says, Rabbi, Hanu Tanakama, they seem the same. Why is it Rabbi repeating what the Tanakama said? Two answers. Indeed, yes, he agrees, but he wanted to add further explanation about the efshi clause, that the holech can be ambiguous if he also says efshi. Then holech kamin holacha. Or maybe that's precisely what it's teaching us, that who is the Tanakama? It is Rabbi. So that's why perhaps this was the original smaller baraita, and then someone added this section on. The editor of this Tosefta added this section on to tell us, oh, Tanakama, you know who that is? That is in fact Rabbi. Okay, so now we understand that machloket. So there's going to be an important machloket for the following discussion. Lehu helach l'Rabbi Natan kezechidame olav kezechidame. We already saw that according to Rabbi Natan, holech all means that you're going to be a shaliach leholacha, right? Holech rasa lachzor yachzor. But for Rabbi Natan, what about helach? That's a lot more ambiguous. Is that also like you're going to acquire it or not? We'll have a couple of proofs. Tashema. Haomed hitkabel get ze liishti. O holech get ze liishti. Rasa lachzor yachzor. Haisha shamra hitkabel ligiti. Rasa lachzor lo yachzor. We're quoting our Mishnah. If the husband says to the messenger, receive this, or holech, then he can change his mind. But if she sends a messenger and says, receive it for me, then the husband, once he gives it to the messenger, cannot change his mind. So, what case are we talking about in the here when the wife says hitkabel giti, and the messenger goes to the husband says something. All right, what does he say? My love behelach v'Rabbi Natan. Does he not say helach and he cannot change his mind? That means helach is like zecheh, right? And this Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Natan. So then that would prove that according to Rabbi Natan, helach is like zecheh. And we say no, not necessarily. La beholech v'Rabbi. Maybe the husband here said holech. And it's the opinion of Rabbi, because Rabbi said, if you holech can mean receive it. And so therefore, this is no proof. All right, we'll try again. Tashema lefichach im amar lo haba'al efshir shetekabel la ela holech v'ten la rasa lachzor yachzor. The continuation of the Mishnah says that if the husband says, I do not want you to receive it, but rather holech v'ten, go and be a messenger for delivery, then he can change his mind. End of Mishnah. Tamad amar efshi halo amar efshi rasa lachzor lo yachzor. So the only reason why he can change his mind is because he says, I do not want you to receive it. But what if he didn't say, I do not want you to receive it? He just said holech. Then if he wants to change his mind, he cannot change his mind. Okay, so my love beholech ve'Rabbi Natan. So my love behelach ve'Rabbi Natan. So is this case not talking about where he said, remember we had a different version of the Mishnah that doesn't say holech, but rather helach. And this Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Natan. And since the husband did not say efshi, he just said helach, so he cannot change his mind. That means helach is like zecheh. And this, we're assuming that this would be the opinion of Rabbi Natan. So is that a good proof? And we say not necessarily. La beholech ve'Rabbi. Right, leave the text as is, and he actually says holech ve'ten la. And this is the opinion of Rabbi Yudan Nasi, who says that if you say efshi, but instead holech, then you're changing him into shaliach holacha. But if you don't say efshi and you just say holech can mean that you should receive it. And therefore, we can just leave the Mishnah as is, and there is no proof. So now we try one more proof. Tashema, holech get ze liishti, rasa lachzor yachzor. Helach get ze liishti, rasa lachzor lo yachzor. Man shemat le damar beholech, rasa lachzor yachzor, Rabbi Natan. Vekamar behelach, rasa lachzor lo yachzor. Shema mina, helach kezeche dame, shema mina. Now a successful proof that Baraita teaches that if the husband says holech, give this get to my wife, then he can change his mind. So that's holech. That's Rabbi Natan's opinion, that holech means to give. If he says helach, then he cannot change his mind. So that's the end of the Braita. The Gemara analyzes, who is it that says that holech means give it, and therefore he can change his mind because he's a shaliach leholacha. That's the opinion of Rabbi Natan. And yet the second clause says in helach, if he wants to change his mind, he cannot change his mind. Therefore helach is like saying be a shaliach lekabbalah. And so we have a final conclusion. According to Rabbi Natan, helach is like saying acquire it. Itmar, hitkabel ligiti, vishtecha amera, hitkabel ligiti, vehu omer, holech veten la. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, Naasa shilucho ushlucha veholeset. If a woman appoints a shaliach lekabbalah, and the shaliach correctly represents himself to the husband and says, I'm a shaliach lekabbalah, and he says holech, so we just saw there's machloket about holech. So the Rav says that holech is ambiguous, and therefore this messenger becomes both his messenger and her messenger. well, she can't actually be both, but it's a safek whether it's going to be remains a shliach Kabbalah if holech could mean lekabbalah like Rabbi, or maybe holech is changing him into a shliach holacha like Rabbi Natan. Since there's a safek, so we're not sure if she's married or not. Therefore, if the husband dies and they happen to not have children, the brother has to do chalitza and cannot do yibum. He has to do something. He has to do chalitza because maybe they're married. He can't do yibum because maybe they're not married. And if the get was effective, then the brother is not allowed to take his former sister-in-law. So holech is safek. Lememra demisapek ale lerav I holech kezeche dameh I lav kezeche dameh והאיתמר הולך מנה לפלוני שאני חייב לו אמר רב חייב באחריותו ואם בא לחזור אינו חוזר. So according to this, you're telling me that Rav is in doubt whether holech means acquire or it means or it doesn't mean acquire, it means take. Well, wait, but we have a contradiction because in another case, if a person gives money to a messenger and says, give this $100 to that person because I owe him money. And so now he's on the way. So Rav says that the sender is responsible for it. So that would mean that he's a shaliach leholacha in case it gets lost. But that's not the important thing right now. The important thing is here, if he wants to change his mind, if the sender wants to change his mind, he can run faster, get to the messenger and say, no, you know what? I don't want to get it. I don't want to give it. If he does that, it does not work. He cannot change his mind. He cannot take it back, which means that this messenger is a shaliach lekabbalah. Even though he said holech, Rav seems very clear. He knows this is not a safek. That is a valid shaliach lekabbalah. So why is he in a safek regarding our case? But in this monetary case, he says holech means receive, and the answer is hatam safek mamona lekula hacha safek isura lehomra. In our case, we're talking about a prohibition of concerning marriage. So there we have to be machmir, since holech could mean that they are divorced or not divorced. We have to assume the worst of both cases, that she is both married and not married, and therefore she would have to do chalitza. Whereas when it comes to money, so there, it's not that it's lekula, it's just hamosim mechavero alav hareaya. And so if the husband wants to, if the sender wants to get the money back, let him go and prove that's what he said, and that's what he meant, and that's what holech means. If he can't prove that, then the money is going to go to the receiver. On the other hand, because it is in fact a safek, he also is responsible for it until it gets to the other side. So it does, even in this case, he does get the worst of both worlds. So it is in fact a safek, but the safek tilts towards the receiver since it's already on the way there. So the motzi mechavero is the sender. Okay, good. Amarav, en haisha osa shaliach lekabel lagita miyad shaliach ba'ala. Rabbi Chanina amar isha osa shaliach lekabel lagita miyad shaliach ba'ala. So we're talking about a case where the husband sends a messenger to give the get, and the question is, can the wife afterwards send a messenger to receive the get? Rav says no, a wife cannot make a messenger to receive the get from a messenger. Everyone agrees she can make a messenger to receive it directly from the husband, but she can't make a messenger to receive it from a messenger. Rabbi Chanina, however, says yes, she can. She can make a messenger to receive it from the husband's messenger. Now, what would be the problem with this? One reason is because this shows contempt for the husband. How so? The husband may say, if he cares about this, you know what, I want to send the get, and I want my wife to receive it directly, right? I want her to have that experience of receiving her get, and if she can't receive it herself, she's going to send someone to receive it. So he will feel lowered by that. His esteem might hurt his esteem, and he might not want to give the get, and that's the husband's prerogative because he has to give the get willingly. So if he doesn't send the messenger, he's giving it himself, and she sends a messenger to receive it from him, and he gives it to her, that's not a problem, not even according to Rav, because if he's giving it to a messenger, it means he doesn't mind. I don't care if the messenger gets it or she gets it, that's fine. But if he sends it with a messenger with the assumption that it's going to go to her directly, and then instead she sends a messenger, he may not want to give it to a messenger. He may feel belittled by that. And so that's why, according to Rav, that's what would not be allowed. That's one reason. Or it's a gezerah. That this case, you might be confused with a different case. A husband can take a get. He doesn't have to put it in the woman's hands. He could throw it into her field. As long as she owns it, it goes into her domain. That would be okay. What would not be okay is if the husband puts it into a field of a third party, a friend, and then transfers ownership of that field to the wife. In that case, that would be the same as if a wife just found the get herself and was not delivered to her. It was not put in her courtyard while she owned it. She received ownership of the courtyard while the get was already there. In that case is no good. This case might look similar because he's giving it to one shaliach, and then that shaliach that's a third party, is giving it to another shaliach to give to her. So if technically it would be allowed, but if you allow that, then people would think, oh, so you know what? Giving it to putting it in that field, that's like giving it to a messenger. Of that, the friend would be the messenger, and then when the field goes to her, the field would be like a shaliach lekabbalah, so they would think that's the same, but that case would not be good. My benaihu will be a practical case where it will make a difference between these two cases. Ika benaihu de kadma ihi veshavya shaliach me'ikara. If she appoints a shaliach lekabbalah first, and then he sends a messenger to give it, well, that's not similar to the field case. And so that would be permitted if we follow this reason. That's a gezerah that looks like a field. But if it's for the bizayon of the husband, well, then that would apply also here, because the husband might say, wait, I'm sending it with a messenger, but I wanted her to get it. I don't want a messenger to receive it. So that reason would still apply. A story. Hau gavra de shadar la gita ledebitu. Azal shlicha ashkacha kiatva veka laisha. Amar la helach gitech amra le leheve bidach. Amar Rav Nachman im ita lidrabi Chanina abdi ba obada. So you had a certain person. He sent a get with a messenger to his wife. The messenger got there and found that she was kneading dough, so her hands were all dirty. Now the messenger said, "Here is your get," and she said, "Listen, my hands are dirty. I can't receive it now. So can you be my messenger to receive it for me? I know you're a shaliach leholacha. Can you change your identity right now and be a shaliach lekabbalah on my behalf?" So is that a good get or not? Rav Nachman says, well, it depends on the machloket we just saw. If you follow the opinion of Rabbi Chanina, who allows a wife to make a shaliach lekabbalah, to receive it from a shaliach leholacha, then yes, he did a good thing. According to Rav, it wouldn't be good, because that's with those two reasons, it's not allowed. But according to Rabbi Chanina, it's no problem, even though it's the same person who is both a shaliach leholacha and now becomes a shaliach lekabbalah. That's Rav Nachman's opinion. However, Amar le Rava, ve'im ita l'Rabbi Chanina, avadet ba obada. Rava disagrees with Rav Nachman. Says even if you follow Rabbi Chanina, you think that this is a good get. It's not. Ha lo hazra shelichut esel habal, because the messenger cannot possibly go back to the husband and say mission accomplished. So we need for a messengership to be successful. It's not that the messenger always has to actually go back to the sender, but he has to be able, even theoretically, potentially, to go back to the sender and says, I finished my job. The problem here is that the shaliach leholacha from the husband never completed his job, because in the middle of his job, he changed his role and became a shaliach lekabbalah. And so at what point exactly, did he finish? Because he's not giving it to, has to give it to himself. He can't quite do that. And so because he doesn't finish the messengership that he was sent for, it is no good. Even if you follow Rabbi Chanina. If it's two different messengers, that's okay. One gives it to the other. But it can't be the same person. Shelahu lekamed Rabbi Ameh. Rav Nachman and Rava sent this issue to Rabbi Ameh for his opinion. Shalach lehu lo hazra shelichut esel haba'al. Ve Rabbi Chaya bar Abba amar nitjasheb badavar. Rabbi Ameh agreed with what Rava said, that it's no good because the first messenger did not complete his messengership, and such that he cannot go back to the husband and say, I finished, because in the middle, while he was a shaliach holacha, he suddenly became a shaliach lekabbalah, so it's no good. Rabbi Chia bar Abba, when he was sent this question, he said, Nitasheb badavar, let's consider the matter. He wasn't sure, he has to think about it more. Later on, Hadur Shelachu Lekamed Rabbi Abba bar Abba. Someone sent Rabbi Chia bar Abba another case, a same case or a similar case. Amar Kol Hane Shalchu La Ve'azleh says, how long are people going to keep sending me the same question? I told you I don't know. I'm still have to think about it. Just like I wasn't sure about that case before, I'm still not sure about this case. I don't know how to resolve it. So what should we do if we're in Safek? Since this is a matter of forbidden relations, so we have to assume stringency for both sides, and therefore we have to worry that maybe she is still married and maybe she's not still married. Therefore, if the husband dies without children, the brother would have to do chalitza, just in case they were married, and cannot do yibum, just in case they weren't married. Hava obada, another story. Vasrecha Rav Yitzchak bar Shemuel bar Marta get vehalitza. The same Rabbi Rav Yitzchak. No, we're going to see Rav Yitzchak in a second. Rav Yitzchak bar Shemuel bar Marta required in that case a get and chalitza because he was in Safek. We clarify, Tarte, get and chalitza? No, rather, get mechayim chalitza lachar mita. If the husband is still alive, then he has to give another get, and if he dies without children, then the brother has to do chalitza. Hahi davu karu la nefata. Azul sadeh ketob tifata. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Shemuel bar Marta mishmed Rav asu aidim shelichutan. So we have another case that happens to be also be Rav Yitzchak bar Shemuel. But this is a case of a get that was written with the wrong spelling. The woman's name was Nifata. Instead, they wrote Tifata. This is the problem. So that get is no good. The question is, can the same witnesses write another get? Right? The husband authorized witnesses, here, go write a get from my wife. They did a bad job. So according to Rav Yitzchak bar Shemuel bar Marta, his name of Rav, they already finished their messengership, and that's it. They have no more agency to do another. The husband would have to go and appoint them again, or appoint someone else to write another get, because that's it. This was a one-time only pass. Matkif la Rabba, mi kamar lehu ketobu chaspa vehabu la. But Rabba disagrees. He said, did the husband say, write a pottery shard and give it to her? In other words, write nonsense? You didn't write a get. You wrote some random words. You wrote someone else's name. That's not a get for my wife. So they never even did their job the first time. Since they never did their job the first time, they are still agents, right? They're still glowing, and they can do it again, right? Elamaraba vadai katub sahade gita ma'alia ve'abad asu edim shelichutan. When would Rabba agree that they're not glowing anymore? They used it up, even though it didn't work. If they wrote a good get, kosher get with the correct name, they did everything correctly, but then they lost it. In that case, the Edim did what they were supposed to do, because the husband said, write a get for my wife. They did write a get for his wife, and even though it didn't get to her because they lost it, they accomplished their mission, and they cannot go ahead and write another one. That was Rabba's opinion. Matkif la Rav Nachman, mi kamar kitvu ve'anhu bechisayu. Rav Nachman says, no. Did the husband say, write it and leave it in your pocket? No. When he says write the get, he means, and make sure that it gets to my wife. If it doesn't get to her, then you didn't accomplish the mission, and you have to do it again. Even if it gets lost, they are still authorized, they're still agents to write another one. According to Rav Nachman, the very same witnesses remain agents, even if they have to write it 100 times and something goes wrong every time, until it gets to her and is a valid divorce. They are still glowing, they still have the authority of the husband to write another. Question: Be'amine Rava Rav Nachman kitvu utnu leshaliach mahu salukeh salik lehu odir malitircha didhu chayish. Rav Nachman, right? You say that, right? Until it gets until it's done, it's not done. Well, what about in this case? If the husband says, write to witnesses, write a get, and give it to this messenger. Well, in that case, once they give it to the messenger, so then that's it, they're excluded. Let's say the messenger messes up and loses it. Do we say that, well, they did their job, they gave it to the messenger, and that's all they were authorized to do, and so if it gets messed up after, they cannot write another one? Or maybe what the husband meant when he said, give it to a messenger, is just that, he was worried about not burdening the witnesses too much, that they have to also go and deliver it and travel. So he was saying, listen, if you want, make it easier for yourself, you can give it to a messenger. But he was only saying that to be nice. Really, he wants these messengers to see it through to the end, and therefore, if something goes wrong, they are still authorized to write another one and make sure it gets there in any way that it needs to get there. So this question is not answered. We follow up with a further question. What if in addition the husband says, write and give the get to a shaliach, and the shaliach will deliver it to her? So those additional words, does that add more agency? In other words, and follow up with the messenger to make sure that the messenger gives it to her, right? Or does that not make a difference? And so we leave that open, that question open. And lastly, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel af ha'omeret tol ligitim rasat lachzor lo yachzor. If she makes a messenger to receive it, and the husband said, tol, right, take this get, that is a language of receive it, as a shaliach lekabbalah, and therefore he cannot change his mind. So Rashbag is adding that toli is like hitkabel. Tenurabanan toli v'sali v'yeheli biyadcha kulan lishon kabbalah hen. A beraita adds not only tol, but also if he says sali, carry it for me, or this should be in your hands. If the husband says any of those formulas to the messenger that she sent, then they are all languages of receipt, and they will take effect immediately when the messenger receives it, and he cannot change his mind. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.